Hello, my wild darlings. Hello, hello. Good to see you. It is Sunday morning at 1 o'clock here in California. That is 1 a.m. And I'm Tad. I will be here for a while. I'm going to be reading and just blathering as per usual. I hope you are well. I hope you have had a good weekend so far, wherever you may happen to be, whether this is your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it might be. It don't matter. We are a global movement, a very tiny global movement, but a global movement nonetheless. And I am very proud to be here spending some time with you. And you notice the very informal look today, just this black t-shirt. We went to a celebration of life today for one of our neighbors. And I spent a good stretch of the day wearing a suit and tie. Interestingly enough, I was the only person so dressed. Everybody else was very much in the comfort mode. But I just felt like it was the right thing to do. And, one of the good things about, I spent years having to wear a suit because that was the kind of jobs that I had, retail jobs and things like that, banking jobs, et cetera, et cetera. So now it's kind of, I like wearing suits occasionally. Sometimes when I'm on tour, I wear suits all the time. I dress up to go out or go to weddings or, in this case, a celebration of our neighbor's life. Yeah, that's not a complaint. I didn't mind, but I thought I would wear something a little more comfortable otherwise. So I'm sorry I have robbed you of your chance to see me in a stupid suit with a tie on. But come see one of my book tours and maybe you'll get a chance to have a glimpse of that exciting eventuality. What else is going on? Well, just the normal stuff. I'm actually I'm working on a short story. I had to take a brief break from the Splintered Sun because I recalled that I have a short story that is due for an anthology called Unforsaken, if I remember correctly, being edited and put together by Peter Arulian and Sean Speakman. I believe Sean is involved in doing this as well. So I'm working on a story for that, which I was going to try and do before we went to England, and that didn't work out. And so, as usual, I'm scrambling around trying to catch up with myself. And what else has been going on? Just the usual. As I mentioned, we went to a celebration, a memorial for a neighbor of ours, and it was really interesting. I mean, not obviously it was what it was. It was a celebration of somebody who had recently died and who we knew and liked. But it was also somebody that we only knew as a neighbor. It was really interesting to hear his family, his grandkids especially, talking about him and how important he'd been in their lives and all that. And I didn't mean end all that in a dismissive manner at all. It was actually very, very touching. And it was also very, very interesting to hear somebody that we knew in only one way, which was, as somebody that we saw and talked to and all that, but who was a neighbor, from the point of view of their close family and really getting a whole different side of them and as unsurprisingly as it always does, as being at my own parents' memorial stroke celebration of life, last summer, it puts things in perspective in a sense. I mean, it makes you really think about what matters. And if you are like me and you are not expecting to be rewarded in the afterlife or punished for that matter, it makes it even more pointed what you leave behind. And so, it always is a good thing to think about, and I hate to get serious so quickly, but this is what happens when you go to a memorial. You really have to think about that, and you think about, well, what do I hope what do I hope I'm leaving behind? Not that I'm intending to leave anytime soon, knock wood. But yeah, I mean, nobody knows. Nobody knows for certain. And what is it that you want to leave behind? Is it that you intend to do? Now, I have a lucky situation in the sense that I have written more than a few books, and so there's a sense that I have in which something of me is going to be around as long as people are reading those things. But that's, a different kind of thing than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, well, no, I guess it's another way. It's another way of making contact with people and making, you hope, some kind of an effect on the lives of others. But, then there's also, as I spent the entire week dealing with insurance, there's also our near and dear, our family and close friends and all that. And the effect that you're going to have, or have had, or, will continue to have on those other lives around you. And I don't have any conclusion. I mean, this is, my conclusions I arrived at a long time ago, which is basically the Albert Einstein thing about, choosing kindness, or your religion being kindness. I think that was Einstein that said it. And there's certainly the Kurt Vonnegut quote, which used to be on my Twitter page, and I've used it on Facebook, which was, the one that starts out for, first babies, you have to be kind. It's a welcome to earth. First thing, babies, you have to be kind. And of course, that is super important because especially, and that was a lot of what was being talked about at the memorial service today, was that it's the effect that you have on the young people and the children around you that has the most potential, or the most spread over time. And one of the things I've always said about my parents and my grandparents was that even for our kids who weren't around, say, for instance, to know my grandmothers, they were so important to me that I wanted to tell our kids about them so that they understood that the kindness and love that my grandparents showed me was something that, I was endeavoring to pass along. And of course, my own parents too, who were very, very kind people, and really just wonderful citizens in all ways that you can be that. And so that's kind of on my mind at the moment. No deep, profound thoughts, except, as I said, kindness. Doing what you can whenever you can. Even though sometimes we'd all rather just go creep off to our rooms or our offices or whatever and be left alone, or, whatever it might be that, whatever selfish thing we'd rather be spending our time doing sometimes when other people need us. But, ultimately that's, for me anyway, that's what I believe that we leave behind, is just that effect that we had on other people. And it is also the way to build the future without being around for the future. Not that we're not all plunging headlong into the future every moment, every second, but in the sense of the things that will happen long after you're gone, that you can't control them, you can't make them be a certain way, but you can sow seeds that you hope will sprout, whether you're around or not. It's like the people who plant trees. I mean, that's a more literal version, but the people who plant trees knowing they will not be around when the trees have reached their full growth, but they're planting for future generations. And kindness is the same way. You may not be around to ultimately see how it pays off, but you will know that you've done your best. And that's all anybody can ever know, because the future is not fixed, and there is no ultimate answer to, well, what's going to happen. What's going to happen is happening, and it will continue to happen. All right, well, that's a lot of gibberish to start off with. But this is what happens when you send me off to a memorial wearing too tight of a tie. My blood lodges in my brain and makes me think strange thoughts. So let me just check in and see who has shown up. And I see Sandra has checked in from Vienna. Good morning, good morning. Good to see you. Christy has checked in. Hello, good morning to you, Christy. Isaac from the dark valley of morning. Ooh, very, very dramatic sounding. Anyway, good to have you, Isaac, as always. Maria Henschke, hello, checking in from Germany. Mark Redman is checking in from a short break in Liverpool. So he is hanging out with my Scouser friends and my Liverpudlian chums. So that's a lovely thing to do. And I hope you're having a good time, Mark. Christina, hello, good morning. And Christina, of course, is checking in from sunny Berlin. Well, I'm glad to hear it's sunny. We had very nice weather here the last few days. Not that, that matters particularly, especially not for somebody like me who spends most of their time indoors. But it has been very nice here. And I've thought about this because, of course, in other parts of America, they're having a horrible heat wave. And many of my friends are in places and people I don't know, but who I don't think anything ill of and want them to be as healthy and happy as possible. A lot of people that I know are stuck in the middle of a heat wave in other parts of the country. So we've been very lucky, but I don't suppose I should dwell on it. Ivan, hello, buddy. Good to see you. There's my friend Ivan. Chris Fab, hello, Chris. Good to see you too. And Mr. Mark Craigbaum, good to see you, buddy. Hello, hello. There's Kristen Rule checking in. Hello, Kristen. Nice to have you with us. Petra, good morning. Guten Morgen. And how you are back after 2 lovely weeks in Tuscany. How very nice. I missed Tuscany. I am ready to go back there this moment. Loved all of it. Particularly fond of Siena for some reason. Siena really caught my heart when I went the first time. I think maybe because I didn't know as much about it as I knew about Florence. So I kind of just went, oh, we're close to Siena, and I hear that's a really interesting place, and went there and just thought it was amazing. So glad you had a good time, which I'm assuming from the 2 lovely weeks were Mark, and very good to see you. So welcome, Petra. Nicole, hello. Good to see you too. Penny, hello. A pleasure to have you. Alexandra, checking in from the Netherlands, where it's hot, apparently. And Isaac says, the slim end of Cache Valley, 2 ranges of steep mountain hemming us in far northern Utah. So also pretty dark. Sounds like living in Manhattan. Where it gets dark early in the day sometimes when you're in downtown, in the heart of the tall buildings district. André says, hello, mesdames et messieurs. And we say in return, hello, André. Un plaisir. Chenua, hello. Baby hasn't been sleeping. Well, thank you for dropping in anyway, and I'm sorry to hear the baby isn't sleeping well. I remember how that is. Believe me, I do. Ivan has nice things to say, which I'm not going to read because it just would be embarrassing, but Ivan is always a very nice person. I fooled him completely, as I have fooled you all, because I am actually a very, very mean, cold, cruel person. But I'm also a trained actor. Isaac says, passing on kindness is the aim. Andre says, joining the first time as a dad. Oh, really? Congratulations. That is wonderful news. As I think I said last week, Michael Whalen once said to me, I consider that my life to be in 2 parts, basically before and after I had kids. So it is a profound thing. And as I said when I was writing it online, I think, because I think it's something I wrote on Facebook about a week ago. It's not something I try to proselytize about. I would never advise anybody to have children because it is, first of all, a tremendously personal choice. Second of all, it's a huge responsibility, and it doesn't go away. I mean, my mom, right up until her last day on Earth, was still worrying about all of her kids, and half convinced that we were all going to kill ourselves off somehow if she wasn't around to take care of us and warn us about things and worry. And she was 88 at that point. So, yeah, it's not a small responsibility. Mark comes up with a good turn. Hi there, Kindness Granfalloon. This, of course, is another Vonnegut reference. And what is it? Wampeters, Karasses, Wampeters, and Granfalloons were three of his names for types of organizations of people. Some of them were fake and some of them were real. And I believe it is, no, I don't think Karasses, maybe. Karass is definitely a Vonnegut-ism, but yeah, maybe that was part of it. But it was a 3-word title, something Wampeters, something, and Granfalloons. Anyway, and what else? What else? Who else is here? Endo, checking in from Mexico City, El Ciudad de Mexico. And mucho gusto, señor. Bienvenidos. Actually, I'm not sure that is a señor, because Endo could be any number of names. So, but anyway, a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us. Petra agrees with me that Sienna is indeed amazing and special. Isaac also chimes in to say it's not 3 digits in Utah yet, but way too hot and dry for June. You have my sympathies. And Alexis just checks in to say, lol. Turgeon, you, as always, have hit the nail on the head. Lol. What else can we say? So here I am. There you are. We are all here together. I'm still trying to think of what that third Kurt Vonnegut thing is, because it's a book of his, I think it's essays or excerpts from his other books, but I believe it's a book of essays. Anyway, someone I'm sure will tell me at some point or post it in the comments section. I do remember Kurt Vonnegut was a great early favorite of mine. I don't think, except in some of my short fiction, I don't think I have ever aspired to write like Kurt Vonnegut or taken him as a particular model for my own work, since I worked in a very different kind of vein. But I always thought he was a hugely entertaining writer, a really smart writer, somebody who played some really interesting games with his readers, and I don't mean that in a negative sense at all. I mean his stance on what he was telling and how true it was and what the purpose of fiction was and all that always really charmed me and interested me. And, you know, some of his books are still among my favorites. You know, obviously Slaughterhouse-Five, but Cat's Cradle and God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and a bunch of others. He was very influential on me as a person, probably as a writer also, but certainly as a person, and just because of his humanity, which I loved. Anyway, so all of that said, and since we're creeping on into the hour that we have put aside for reading, I am going to start reading. And I am, of course, still reading from, where did my book go? From Happy Hour in Hell. You may remember that Bobby has gone to hell in a demon body with special information provided by a guardian angel who seemed to know about some things. And he has delivered the message that his boss Temuel wanted him to deliver, and which was the quid pro quo for Temuel helping Bobby to get into hell. And in the course of delivering that message, he both met the person to whom he delivered the message, who was a demon by the name of Riprash, and a gigantic ogre-like beast with a heart of gold, or at least a heart of not anything too awful, with a gigantic axe wound in his head with the axe still in it. But also met a rather unpleasant character called Commissar Nylock, otherwise known as the Commissar of Wings and Claws. And in the course of avoiding Nylock and hanging out with Riprash, who was so thrilled by the message from Temuel that he had not been forgotten, that Riprash, who is a bit of a proselytizer himself, told Bobby that he would take him along the river and help him to get closer to where he needs to get, which is, of course, ultimately to try to find Kaz, his beloved. So that's where we are. And I am now reading Chapter 17, Gravejaw House. The river was as horrible and dangerous as you'd imagine, full of skeletal pirates on leaking rafts and fanged serpentine creatures big as slimy commuter trains. But we were on a large, well-armed boat, and the nightly tales of Sinbad the Split-Skull Sailor almost made up for the stench and the constant terror that something was going to eat us. Riprash had started out in the service of a demon lord named Crabspatter, and worked his way up to a position of responsibility in the guy's personal guard, until Crabspatter was cut to ribbons by another battered demon in a sea battle at a place Riprash called Sucking Marsh.
Old Crabby went down to the bottom with a spear through his guts. Yes, he did,
said Riprash in the nostalgic tone of someone talking about a dotty uncle.
He's probably still down there, trying to get out of the mud. He was a mean fucker. Oh, that's when I got this.
He reached up and touched the huge gash in his head.
And then I woke up, stripped and robbed of everything. Chained in a line of captives. The winter kept some of us, sold the rest. He laughed. Not surprised he didn't keep me. My head didn't stop bleeding for months.
But the slave trader who bought him recognized Riprash's quality, or at least his immense size, and put him to work as an overseer. Freedom is kind of a moot point in hell, apparently, and Riprash was never granted his, but he worked his way up to positions of greater trust until he was the slave trader's right-hand man. Centuries later, Gagsnatch took over the trader's business. Neither a gentle nor a legal transaction, from what I could tell, but he kept Riprash in the same position of trust, and my new chum had worked for Gagsnatch ever since. He gave me a startled look when I asked him how many years ago that had been.
Years? Words like that don't mean anything much here. Some of the new ones come in and they ask, how long this, how long that, but the rest of us find it doesn't do any good to think about it.
It made me wonder how many years Gob had been a child, scuttling through the narrow alleyways of Abaddon. The kid had been born in hell, but time here didn't seem to mean much, and Gob didn't remember much beyond a few days back, probably because until he hooked up with me, it had all been pretty much the same. I was beginning to see that the whole hell thing, including the timelessness, had been craftily arranged to make the inmates as unhappy as possible. They had to scramble for food and shelter every day, but other than that, things hardly ever changed, or changed just enough to make the repeated doses of punishment more painful. If things are always the same, you get used to them. If they change, if sometimes they get a little better, that makes the return to misery all the more painful. So, if any of you plan to open your own hell, remember this time-tested recipe. Vary the suffering so your victims don't get completely numb. Show them something better from time to time, just to keep them hoping. I couldn't help wondering whether Riprash's fellowship, the Lifters, might actually be part of the infernal master plan. After all, what better way to ensure suffering than to wave a little hope for better days in front of the damned and the doomed? Riprash didn't believe that, though, and I certainly wasn't going to argue. I had come to trust him, and he even seemed to like Gob in a how demons do it sort of way. Since Gob was always as hungry as a feral cat, he gave the boy little handouts of food and was amused by the kid's elaborate caution whenever we left the confines of the tiny cabin.
Don't you know you're on my ship, little bug? Riprash would bellow. Nobody even pisses on the nagging bitch without my say-so.
I never did find out if Riprash's ship was named after anyone in particular, but Riprash had women, using the term loosely, in every port the slaver traded. Not that I ever encouraged him to share those stories. If you ever want to lose your interest in sex, try spending your vacation in Acheron Landing or even Penitentia. the spit of mud, rock, and ramshackle huts where we stopped for supplies on the second day. The dockside hookers looked like extras from Attack of the Mole Men, but Rip Rash assured me that only the best-looking ones got to work the oncoming vessels. I won't bore you with a description of the entire trip. From the middle of a river, one hell city looks pretty much like another, namely horrible. The third day, we finally sighted Gravejaw, a sullen knob of black lava rock that stuck out into the black swell of Cocytus like a bunion. A natural bay at its base had made it a port, and the desperate nature of life in hell had soon turned it into a crawling ant heap of souls and demons. At the top of the great mound of stone, surrounded by walls as high as those of the city itself, stood a castle, a forest of black towers, slender and sharp as an eel's teeth. A huge banner flapped on the uppermost spire, a white bird's claw painted on sable ground. It wasn't the tallest thing on Gravejaw, though. At the center of the city, a massive column loomed over everything else, like a giant central pillar holding up the sky.
The banner's Nylock's, and that place with the black towers is his, Rip Rash said. Don't go near it. That's my advice. I'll tell you how to get across the city from here. See that?
He pointed to the great pillar, which, as we grew closer, I could see was made from some kind of mud brick, but loomed higher than any skyscraper. Even now that the second set of beacons had been lit on the walls of Gravejaw, the closest thing to full daylight, it was impossible to see where the great cylinder ended, since it stretched up into the blackness of the monstrous cavern's invisible roof.
You just get there, and the lifter will take you where you want to go.
I could ride it all the way up to Pandemonium, apparently, many levels above us. That part was heartening, but I was still a bit confused by it all. See, our river trip had taken us up at least a dozen levels, which didn't make any sense at all. I certainly hadn't noticed us sailing uphill, and the Cocytus, black and sticky and noxious as it was, seemed in all other ways to obey the laws of gravity and physics I knew. But this was hell, after all, and although it was more realistic, for lack of a better word, than heaven, it wasn't any more real. As an angel, I was used to the slippery distances and untellable time of heaven, so it wasn't much of a stretch to accept that some things in hell, no matter how illogical, just were. I don't know if you can hear them. The cats are having a merry old time over there. I scrubbed myself with bits of sail-mending canvas to get the worst muck off me, since the river was way too dangerous for swimming. In fact, ordinary souls didn't use water to bathe in hell. It was too rare. Then Gob and I waited for Rip Rash to give us a sign that it was safe to disembark. We sat for what seemed like hours, the boy pacing back and forth across the tiny cabin until I wanted to clout him. I was already wondering what I was going to do with Gob. I didn't want to take him with me any farther because I might have to make a hasty retreat from some very bad place, and it was going to be hard enough to figure out how to smuggle Kaz out without adding Gob to the equation. On the other hand, I dragged him far away from the places he knew. I didn't have a single iron spit to pay him off with, and leaving him on his own here in Gravejaw might put him in even greater danger. Then a sudden idea hit me. I left Gob pacing and went to find Rip Rash. I should have stayed in the cabin, like he told me, but I was suddenly fired up with the idea of doing someone a good turn. I am, or used to be, an angel, remember? And I blundered up the ladder to the main deck. The first thing I ran into was one of Rip Rash's minions, the cat-like, bug-eyed one who had gaped at me back at the slave stall in Cocytus Landing like I was some long-lost relative. I couldn't imagine any reason why this grubby little thing should be looking at me with such insolent familiarity. You could see that hell was starting to get to me. So before he could work up his nerve to say something, I demanded to know where Rip Rash was. On the dock, said Crazy Cat in a high, stuttering voice. But I think I probably just look like his old Uncle Pitchfork or something. Worse, despite Temuel's promises, maybe the little creature had recognized the demon body that the Archangel and Lame had given me. Either way, I didn't want that conversation, so I brushed past him. I was a few steps down the gangplank when I realized something about the busy dock looked wrong. Not the weird insect-like beasts of burden being loaded with cargo, nor the other ghastly, half-naked creatures sweating beneath the whips of the overseers, some of them so deformed it was a wonder they could work at all, let alone carry such huge loads, but something far more disturbing. Riprash stood on the dock, but he was completely surrounded by armed demon soldiers, a dozen of them or more, all wearing Nylok's white bird claw insignia. What was worse, Nylok himself sat mounted on the back of a tall and only slightly horse-like insect creature, and Riprash was talking to him. Nylok saw me. So quickly it seemed like he had been looking for me. For a moment I was convinced Riprash had sold me out, and I cursed myself for ever trusting a demon. After all, that was what had landed me here in hell in the first place. And here he is, dear, dear me. How charming. His bony tendrils wavering in the sea breeze like the fronds of a sea anemone, Nylok spurred his weird insect horse toward the base of the gangplank. Let me try that again. His bony tendrils wavering in the sea breeze like the fronds of a sea anemone, Nylok spurred his weird insect horse toward the base of the gangplank. Riprash has just told me of your bad fortune, Lord Snakestaff. It is a credit to you that you have climbed so far back after such a nasty little trick. I was frozen on the top of the gangplank. Trick. Of course. Riprash turned and gave me a look of what I assume was mute pleading. It's hard to tell when so much of a person's face has been ruined.
Yes, I told him how you were betrayed and abandoned in the lower levels by your enemies.
He turned back to Nylok.
Snakestaff needs only to reach the lifter, Lord Commissar, and then he'll be right as rot.
Nylok let out one of his whistling laughs. Oh, of course. But first he must come and take his ease with me in Gravejaw House and tell me all about the adventures he has had. He almost sounded sincere, but even if I'd trusted him, I wouldn't have wanted to go anywhere with that fluting, inhuman thing. Surely you must be longing for a proper meal, Snakestaff. Delicacies, yes. And I shall see you have some proper clothes, too. Going naked as the crawling damned will not smooth your passage back to Pandemonium. They are dreadfully judgmental up at the Capitol.
That's very kind,
I said, croaking a little in my effort to sound casual.
But there's no need for you to trouble yourself over a creature like me, Lord Commissar.
Whatever else Nylok was, he clearly outranked me, so there was no way I could just refuse. Nonsense. Where in the Red City do you live? Blister Row. It's near Dispater Square. I was glad Lame had given me a response. I couldn't help wondering if the place actually existed. Perhaps I could use it as a sanctuary when I made it to Pandemonium. If I made it to Pandemonium. A delightful little neighborhood. I'll be pleased to let you repay my own insignificant hospitality when I next journey to the great metropolis. Now, come, Snakestaff, brave traveler, you shall
Enjoy a night with me after so long on shipboard and so many tiresome experiences in the depths.
I only had time for a quick whispered conference with Rip Rash. I begged him to take care of Gob, and he said he would, at least until he could deliver him back to me, which wasn't really what I'd hoped for.
We'll meet again, Snakestaff,
The giant rumbled.
That you can rest yourself on.
I wasn't as confident as Rip Rash. I said goodbye, keeping it formal because Nyloc's beady little scarlet eyes were watching us. You've been kind to me, I told him quietly. The giant frowned, and I realized it was an unfamiliar term. You've done me no harm. You've even done me a good turn. I'll remember that. Then, my heart in my mouth, where it was the only thing keeping my meager yet repulsive breakfast from being forcibly ejected, I followed the rattling commissar across the dock. He directed me to a pallet, already loaded down with a cage of slaves and carried by more slaves, who moaned in quiet hopelessness as I added my weight. Then the whole procession followed Nyloc up the winding road through the vast slum of Gravejaw, bound for the needle-towered citadel at the top of the hill. My first impression of Gravejaw House was that I had somehow fallen out of hell and landed smack dab in the middle of Shoreline Park, the abandoned and thoroughly dilapidated amusement park back home in San Judas. The commissar's fortress, rising like a bizarre tumor from the crest of the hill, looked less like a castle than a pile of giant toy blocks left behind by some bored and colossal infant. It was hard to tell under the red lantern light of hell, but the leaning walls and the bottoms of the crooked towers seemed to be painted in broad multicolored stripes and whorls and other odd patterns. The entrance road wound through vast, chaotic gardens which seemed to consist mostly of partially skeletonized corpses, planted waist deep in dry, stony ground, tangled in vines and prickling thorns so that it was hard to tell where the foliage left off and the muscle fibers and slickly gleaming nerves began. When I saw one of them twitch and its ragged mouth form a soundless cry for help, I was reminded that nothing in hell really dies.
Ah, said Nyloc, watching my face. Do you like it? It is so hard in these rustic areas to know what to do with servants when they become too decrepit to work. I could have sold them for scrap, but I wouldn't have got much. This way they continue to serve.
Wonderful, I said, which was as much as I could manage without throwing up. The worst part was that all the shrub people struggled to turn as we passed, trying to catch the commissar's attention, their mouths gaping, and eyes, where eyes still remained, bulging as they struggled to make their ruined bodies plead for them. Not that Nyloc would have cared.
Did you see this one? He asked. My old butler.
He pointed to a thing I wouldn't have noticed, since it was one of the few ornaments not moving. There was only the barest hint of a face and limbs.
He dropped an entire Jeroboam of maiden's tears.
The shrub was bent beneath the weight of a stone dish the size of a truck tire.
I told him when he catches enough to make up for what he spilled, I'll put him back to work.
The unlikely chance of any maidens happening by and crying into that huge stone bowl, let alone enough of them to fill it, seemed to make Nyloc very cheerful. As I went past, I saw that I had been wrong, and the shrub was moving, trembling so slightly beneath the great weight of stone that there might have been a breeze, but no breeze was blowing. We reached the front gate, a pair of crude demon statues with a length of iron grill between them, which swung open at our approach. Beyond it lay a couple dozen yards of curious bumpy pathway, and then the big black door.
"Are you barefoot?"
Nylock asked me. Several of his servants had come spilling out the gate, scurrying out on either side of the path to help the commissar dismount from his strange insectoid horse.
"Of course you are. Your enemies have taken your clothes. But that is good. Good. The house needs to know where you've been so it can prepare the proper hospitality."
He pointed one of his strange bony fingers, and the spiraling horns on his arm rattled a little.
"Go on, friend Snakestaff. Walk forward. On the path."
I did. It was gray as old meat, and it felt like it as well, spongy and giving beneath my soles. I didn't like it much, but it wasn't the worst feeling in the world, at least not until I was halfway, at which point I felt the bottoms of my feet getting moist. Within a few more steps, I was sloshing ankle deep in fluid. The path seemed almost to cling to my feet each time I put them down. The whole thing reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite figure out what until just before I stepped off onto the front porch. A tongue. I was walking on a huge tongue. I all but leaped from the end in my hurry to get off it. When I turned back, I could see the furrow down the middle, the little bumps that had allowed it to taste me, the shine of the saliva that was even now draining back into the coarse pores. It was all I could do to stay upright. Nylock's slaves had taken off his boots, and as he walked up the path behind me, his cloud of horny extensions shaking gently around him, he muttered little endearments at the thing.
"Oh, yes, my hungry beauty. You like that? Goodness, you do. I trod on that one. It squealed like a puppy. Is it sweet? Yes, between my toes."
I turned away. The toes in question were like armor-plated worms wriggling against the soft gray flesh of the tongue, and Nylock kept stopping to let the path enjoy them. No sane person should have to see that. Nylock gestured for me to go inside. It was too late to run, so I stepped forward. The entry hall was a chaos of monstrous angles and pools of shadow. Things scuttled past that I didn't want to look at too closely.
"Why so dark?"
Nylock asked, with just a hint of impending mayhem, and several slaves, small creatures like burned apes, leaped forward to begin spinning wheels set into the wall. Translucent spheres mounted on the wall began to glow, driving many of the smallest crawlers back into hiding.
"What do you think?"
the commissar asked. Slaves were removing his armor. I turned away, not eager to see more of Nylock's horrible form.
"My lanterns are as good as anything in the Red City, you must admit. There is a gas that seeps from beneath this hill that feeds flame. It is why I made my home here. Long after the last lamp is extinguished, lights blaze in Gravejaw House. They can be seen for miles and miles."
His slaves stepped away now. His slaves stepped away. Nylock now wore something like a camel's saddle blanket, a shapeless black thing that could have been a house dress, covered with splotches that might have been a pattern or just Nylock's breakfast mess. The whole thing stretched over his protrusions like a very ugly parade float waiting to be unveiled.
"Now come, my dearest," he said. You will dine with me, charming Snakestaff. Oh, most certainly. After the poor fare of a slave ship, you will be pleased to see what my kitchen can provide.
I was ushered into a long, low hall. The huge table was solid stone, pitted with holes that I only realized later were actually drains. A pair of battered-looking slaves hurried me to my seat, little more than a stone lump beside the table. Nylock had a more elaborate chair, a kind of trestle under a canopy of wrought iron antlers that duplicated the curls of horn hidden by his caftan. Strange creatures clung to the walls, things like inside-out lizards and globby things as shapeless as amoebas. Some were servants, as it turned out, and some were on the dinner menu, but they all came when Nylock called. With help from his slaves, the commissar clambered up onto the trestle and bestrode it like a saddle, so that he was a good twice my height. He seemed to enjoy that, his sideways jaws positively clacking with good cheer.
Ah, yes, he called, so good to be home. And now feed us. Bring us out all the finest delicacies. Your master is back, and we have a guest.
I won't tell you much about the meal. You're welcome. Everything was still alive, and I wouldn't have eaten any of them by choice, even if they weren't. As it was, though, I had to smile and pretend to enjoy the feeling of scrabbly little legs in my mouth or the whimpers of something that didn't enjoy being chewed. Dessert was alive, too, even after it had been doused in something and lit on fire. Nylock insisted I try it before it stopped shrieking. The only thing that saved me was the demon body I was wearing, which apparently had literally more stomach for this sort of thing than I did. I managed to get a few things down, but I knew I would spend the rest of my life, however short, trying to forget this meal.
Now, my good fellow, Nylock said when the last plate of quivering ruin had been cleared away, you must tell me of your travels after this unfortunate kidnapping.
He gestured for the nearest slave to pour something lumpy as gravy into my cup.
You must have seen some wonderful sights in Abaddon. Did you visit the Fountain of Pus? Travelers come from many levels above and below just to see it. Lovely.
I did my best to sound like a disgruntled petty noble complaining about his unwanted trip to the depths, of course. Nylock's questions were sympathetic at first, but after a while I began to think he was trying to trip me up, pulling out little inconsistencies and asking me with poisonous sweetness to explain them.
You see,
he told me after I had finished one long, self-conscious answer,
there are things afoot, my sweet. Oh, yes. Apparently an outsider, he said the word with a hissing emphasis, has got into hell through one of the old, disused gates.
Outsider? Got in? I was suddenly finding it hard to talk, despite the absence of small things kicking in my throat for the first time in an hour. Who
would be so rude as to enter our fair lands without making themselves known, especially if they were sent by you-know-who?
He gave me a look. If those little red eyes could have twinkled, they would have, but instead they just sat there like drops of wet paint.
I couldn't say, but I'm sure you can, my dear Snakestaff.
The eyes went opaque.
Can't you?
But I told you I didn't see anything.
Come, my squishy, breakable friend. The time for that is over. I am so very certain that you have more to share with me that I've arranged an appointment for you with my court jester, Greenteeth. He'll jolly it out of you. Come in, Master Greenteeth. I know you're eager, he called out. We're ready for you now. Something waddled in through one of the doorways. It was only about half my height, but squat and muscular and slick as an amphibian. I couldn't see any eyes on it, but it had plenty of mossy, sharp teeth. Far more than a reasonable mouthful. When it reached Nyloc's side, he reached down to pet it with a clawed hand, as though it were a beloved pet. Invisible bells jingled faintly when the creature moved. He might have been a jester, but I wasn't laughing. You see, the commissar warbled, I promised to bring back some new toys from the Shrieking Meat Bazaar for little Greenteeth. Oh, and I did, my sweet lump, I did. He'll be aching to try them out, and from the way you have behaved at dinner, I suspect you don't like pain. Nylock raised a hand as I began my desperate protests. No, do not be foolish, darling one. I'm sure you're in a hurry to prove me wrong. But we cannot start tonight when you're weary from your travels. That would dull the piquancy of the thing, would it not? Tired flesh is insensitive flesh. He raised a hand. Instantly I was surrounded by burned apes. Their rough fingers closed on my arms and lifted me from my stone seat. We will begin when the morning beacons are lit, or just a little before, Nylock said. I have not had a conversation orchestrated by my beloved Greenteeth for some time. It will be a joyful day. The commissar patted the thing, and it showed its teeth in an even wider grin until I thought the whole top of its head might fall off and roll away. Until the morning, then, take him to his chamber. I was dragged deep into Gravejaw House, past weeping animals and scarred servants with empty expressions, then shackled to the walls of a bare, dank stone room. The slaves' torches reflected from the floor and walls, slick with various liquids, only a few of which were obviously blood. Just before my captors left me, I heard something screech in a nearby room, a shrill, ragged sound that wasn't anything near human. I was pretty sure it was another guest being softened up for a session with the commissar and his pal Greenteeth. The door closed. I heard the heavy bolt being thrown. I thrashed in my chains but could barely move them, let alone break them. With the torches gone, darkness filled the room, a blackness close to absolute. Chapter 18, A Darkness Like Death. I struggled. Of course. Shit, yes, I struggled. I heaved at the chains until every nerve and muscle of my body felt like it was going to burst through my skin, but the links were too heavy and thick, even for demon strength. I tried to pull my hands out through the shackles themselves, but although I tugged until my gray flesh tore against the metal cuffs, in the end I just couldn't slip them free. If I could have bitten off my own thumbs to make it work, I would have. I was that desperate, because I knew that Nylock and his torturer would have me screaming my real name and mission within an hour after starting on me, and then the pain would really begin. But my chains held my hands out at either side of my body, far from my mouth.
My legs were free, but my bottom half wasn't going anywhere without the rest of me. I was slumped in defeat, exhausted and probably bleeding badly when I heard or perhaps felt a whisper of sound in the dark cell. And may his every work come undone, and the stink of his shame follow him wherever he goes. Who's there? I'll leave out the pathetic quaver in my voice. Who said that? After a moment of charged silence, I heard it again, a little louder this time. You can hear me? The voice was female, or seemed to be, but of course you can't trust anything in hell. Who are you? I asked. Where are you? Was it another prisoner in a connecting cell, or just another torment, although more subtle than most of what Nylock had shown so far? Who am I? Now, there's a question. I could almost smell her sour amusement. When I was Heart Spider, the commissar's favorite. Again, the impression of a laugh, bitter and not altogether sane. But there have been several favorites since me. If you look around, you'll see what's left of them. I can't see. It's too dark. Not much left of them anyway. Piles of bones in the corner, picked clean for the most part. Nylock's sticky little torturer gets what's left, but he's a messy housekeeper. I didn't want to think about the bones. But you, where are you? One of the piles? It took me a moment, but then I understood. You're dead? Nobody dies here, you poor fool. If they ever cleaned up, I could at least go on to do my suffering elsewhere. But instead, I've been trapped in this place for longer than I can remember. A ghost. She was a ghost, or at least the closest thing to it I'd encountered in hell. Her body ruined, all but destroyed, but her soul or spirit still haunting the place where she'd been butchered. And the Solihull sisters thought they had it bad because they were stuck with coffee shops. Can you help me? I asked her. If you do, I'll help you. There's nothing I can do for you. A long pause this time. How? How could you help me? You tell me. If I was free, I could carry your bones away from here. Would that help? It might. For a brief moment, I thought I could hear something new in the disembodied voice, but when she spoke, it was flat and hopeless again. But it doesn't matter. I can't bring you the key. I can't command a slave to release you. By my sweet Satan, do you think I'd still be here if I had any power to do anything? A gust of fury blew through the room, a hatred so intense I could feel it. I would have made Nylock my own prisoner long ago, if I could. I would burn him every day with fire till his little red eyes sizzled and popped. I would bind him until his own horns curled back through his flesh. I would tear him and salt him. I would suck his balls out of his vent and chew them like grapes. My chains rattled as I slumped back against the wall. I shared her hatred. One thing about being trapped in hell, I was definitely finding it easier to hate. But it did neither of us any good. And I think I'm going to stop right there before we get any further into the chapter. So, I will continue tonight at 7 p.m. And we will find out more about whether Bobby and Heart Spider managed to evade their respective terrible fates. and yeah, and stuff like that. So thank you for joining me. As always, it's a huge pleasure. Thank you for putting up with my rambling and my blathering, because I do both ramble and blather. And it is a kindness on the part of those of you who come to visit me, to humor me. And so, with that, I say take good care of yourselves, because that's the first and foremost thing that you have to do is take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, your close friends, anybody else around you that looks like they might need a hand, even if it's or just a kind word. Keep your eyes open, and don't be afraid to check in with people, even if it's something that you're embarrassed or shy about. You never can tell when somebody might need that prompting, because they're going through rough times. And with that, I say peace. Thank you so much. See you very, very soon, and be well, all of you. And I'll be back at 7 o'clock. Ciao, ragazzi.